planning board or board of adjustment from the board.
If I can weigh in. They both make recommendations, as we all know, to the Board of Aldermen. I think for them to be able to make those recommendations and to hash things out at their level, it may be better off if we're not there sometimes. Let them do what they're tasked to do, and then report the results of that to our board through their reports and through their staff person, which is the planning director. It's just my thought.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No.
I wasn't going to say anything.
I agree with that, Tom, but I mean, I think that as a board then, and I agree, I think they need to be independent, but then I think as a board then, rather than individuals trying to give direction or information to them, that it should come from the board, not from individuals. Otherwise, we're going to be in a if there's no liaison there, right, and Rick sends them a note saying, hey, I want you to do this and this and this,
You can't.
they're going to take that as a direction from the board.
But that shouldn't happen.
And I don't
It should.
think that
They
should happen. I think it should go through the board.
Well, my question would be, why would Rick send them a note saying, I want to do this, this, and this? I know, but I'm not sure it should.
It shouldn't.
And that's what I'm saying. I
You know,
agree.
it's, I hate to bring it back to my life's work, but we follow the chain of command in both directions. And if we have a beef with them or something we want them to look at, it goes to Alice. Alice sends it to Deb. Deb gets it on their agenda, or we discuss it at our monthly meeting, where we have her there, and usually a rep from. Just I'm not necessarily sure, because I think there's other times when, given what potentially the issue is that either the Board of Adjustment or the Planning Board might be discussing, that as a citizen, it might be advantageous for you as an individual to go and just sit back and watch. Like when we were rezoning the area up around the Tiki Bar, I was there because it's near my house. But at the same time, then we get into an issue if we've already got a board member who's routinely there. Are we now turning this potentially into, all it takes is one more after the guy who wants to see what's happening in his neighborhood? And I know I'm rambling here, but I think you get my point. Do we end up getting into a situation where we've created a special meeting without meaning to?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And in being on the planning board,
Mike.
oh, sorry, and being on the planning board, I think Deb feels freer to communicate with the board members if a Board of Aldermen was not there. It just feels like you got somebody looking over your shoulder, I would think, and planning board, when we there was it was a very relaxed feeling, and everybody sort of felt free to state their opinions without really worrying, well, is this going to get me in trouble saying something? So, even though I was on it and I wouldn't mind being the liaison, I agree with the others. I don't think we need to have one.
Okay. I think we can move on from that one. Then on the town-appointed ones, let's kind of take our time walking through these then. So the BISAC committee right now, we have Mayor Pro Tem Benson and Alderman Grant. And I don't know if you guys want to make any changes to that, or you're comfortable with that. I know it's a new committee and you're still kind of going through it.
If I can, Mayor, I think one of the things that would be helpful to me, because even though I've been an alderman for a while, is understanding the time and the commitments that go along with this stuff. And so, Mike will tell you that we meet once a month, but there's also prep time for it. Okay, there's other things, and there's work involved in that. And my feeling is we've got 2 new aldermen right now, and so my name may be in one of these slots, but I think we ought to go with a clean slate in terms of, and then figure out, how we do this, so that, because when I first joined the board, I didn't want to step on somebody's toes and say, oh, Tom's working on this, and so I really want that, and so I didn't do that. And I don't think that's fair to new aldermen. And we got another election in a year, so who knows? Anyway, just my thought.
Slate the whole thing?
I'm saying that you go through it, and then Tom says he's interested in being on the Parks and Recreation. I'm making that up, right? And you're the only
I wanna
one.
be a fire.
Well, me too. No, my point though is that I think that,
And I get it, and I agree.
yeah.
All right, so then if we step that back to BISAC, why don't we have Mayor Pro Tem talk about the BISAC committee a little bit, because he's the one that formed it.
A little bit.
A little bit. Now, when we set the BISAC up and we appointed members, I'm talking about we, the board, you appointed members for 3-year terms, so I'm not sure why you want to question your appointment when you appointed, who you appointed for 3 years. And what we did when we had the first meeting, other than Alderman Grant and myself, we drew straws to see of the 5 citizen members who would really get a 2-year term or who would get a 3-year term, so we could stagger if we were going to stagger. Of course, you can be reappointed to the committee, so I think we should just move on from the BISAC committee to the next one on the list, 'cause I think we're set there for the next year. That's my view.
Go ahead, Tom.
Do we want to do this like with a raised show of hands, who wants to do what or something, or do we need a whiteboard or something? You know, I'll tell you now, I'm perfectly comfortable with who's on the BISAC committee remaining there. There's others that I'm passionately interested in.
Right, well, that's why.
But that one's not, but, you know, from here,
Well, and just so you know, I've been charged with writing guidelines after our next thing, and if you remember, we talked about this, that a supermajority that everybody on committees is at will, and a
Right.
supermajority can remove somebody. So I think, there's
I can't wait
a
to
couple
see
of
those, by
committees
the
like
way.
that in terms. But my point though is, all right, so I just think that we should have a discussion all the way through it, Mayor, and then say, okay, after people understand the time commitments and what's involved, then go back and say who's interested in A, B, and C.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Because otherwise, I think that, I mean, it's kind of a clean slate, but it's not. But I'm a little bit concerned about having it be, well, I was appointed to this committee, and therefore I get to stay in this committee till it's over, because if you get into that circle, you're never going to get out of it, so.
Okay, well then I'm fine moving on from BISAC as well, because I do know that was just recently formed. So unless there's a huge desire from somebody else to be there. I do not know, honestly, I don't remember what the CIP committee is.
Capital projects.
Oh, that's capital improvement projects.
Yep.
Have you been meeting as a committee?
We're still waiting for the big thing we got right now is the firehouse.
Right.
But basically, that isn't, what are you going to call it, Mike? We meet as needed, but right now, the capital thing is going to be working on the capital budget for next year, but the main project that we had was to move the firehouse forward.
And it was the USDA loans, and it was all of that stuff that you guys worked with Mr. Carter closely on, along with Alice. So is that something, so it's a committee that you still feel is valuable and should remain in place, but it's as needed?
The reason I think it's necessary is because we've never done capital budgets before or done any planning. And what Mike and I were concerned about, we now have money going into the capital project fund
Yep.
each year, and, you can weigh in, Mike, but my feeling is if we don't have something in that place, we're not going to be able to do the planning we need for capital budgets. Whether it's him and I, that's a second question. The big thing is I think we need to make sure that we start planning and not have another firehouse thing, next year that we didn't think about. So, Mike?
Yeah, we've got a list of things that we need to prioritize, and we need to keep the capital improvements fund line item alive and healthy so we can fulfill these needs that the town's gonna have.
And
We
right
got a
now,
ladder truck, we've got old public works building that's rusting out like the fires. So we have a lot of items that we need to be thinking about for the future.
Yes, ma'am.
and from the last budget discussion, when we went through the workshops, we had itemized different initiatives. The first and foremost, of course, was the fire station, which is ongoing, but also land acquisition, police department expansion, and, just an off-site EOC area as well. So those are the the bigger picture items that we discussed as part of the budget process.
Yeah, just being a new person and being, maybe asking some naive questions, do we not have a 5-year capital improvement plan to kind of project where our revenue's coming from and where our spending?
why Mike and I started
Hold
that.
on, we did go through in the last budget a
Yeah.
5-year projection.
Yeah, we did.
So we did pencil in the
Right.
next 5 years as a projection,
But it's a
so,
rolling 5 years.
yes, yeah.
Well, that's what.
Okay, so for this, so what I'm hearing you guys saying is let's just talk about what it is, what is involved. We'll keep moving forward and then we can assign names or change names. So the next one is the parking committee. And I know that was more extensive of a time commitment prior to selecting the vendor. Seems to be working pretty well now, so I don't know how much time has been involved as a parking committee at this point.
I agree. I think it's going very well. Rick and I call a meeting on occasion whenever we have questions, when we want to go over what procedures they're doing, changes. Forecasts, yes, a lot of financials. I'm very pleased with how our vendor has been reacting to everything, any requests we have, any issues, any meetings that we call.
Okay. From a time commitment perspective, though, it sounds like it's minimal and as needed.
It is as needed, and I think it varies on, this time of year we don't have much, but
Right.
come spring and summer, it can be a little more.
Okay.
So it's a variable.
Tom, you might want to weigh in. You were part of the first part of that.
It sounds to me like it's basically where it is now, is it's up and running, and I obviously know it has been for a while, and that your meetings are just to provide steerage and guidance to the vendor. I've been very, very impressed with him. I've driven up to the north end to the driving beach, or whatever we want to call it, and I've actually seen him out there with his wife, helping out, checking cars and stuff, or vehicles to go. When they're peak times and he doesn't have enough employees. Jim Varner's done a great job. I'd like to go back on that one.
Okay. But like I said, I don't have a strong feeling. I just, Connie, to be honest with you, I think Connie, to your credit, you've taken pretty good control of that too. I really do. I mean, it's like,
Well, thank you, and I kind of enjoy keeping tabs on what's going on with that, and I like how it's the direction it's been going.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to Parks and Rec. This is Connie's favorite.
This is a committee that is kind of floundering, but we need to really bolster it up. We don't have a lot of, so far, we don't have a lot of citizen interest in it. We have slight citizen interest, and I think it can grow, but we have the big concert coming up, and I think it's really important. Right now, I'm of course the only alderman on there. I would really like it if we had another alderman.
And I was going to volunteer for that.
Okay.
That's something that I would
All
like
right.
to do. And I've talked with our marketing team at Treasure. Sandy wants to be a part of the concert committee. I think we need I don't know if we need a separate committee because we don't have much going right now except planning for the concert.
Right.
But like Sandy wants to help with it, Shelley wants to help with, so I do have people who will help us. And also I've talked to Jeremy in Surf City. He's the one that just did their live concert with Diamond Rio. He pulled all that together, and he's willing to come and meet with us and kind of give us, yeah.
That's excellent. And in addition, I did meet with the Onslow County Parks and Recreation Director, who gave me a lot of input and a lot of direction on things that the town can do, not only for the citizens, but also for the visitors. These are things that take minimal prep work, minimal people having to help, so that you're not having to ask the town employees to
Okay.
commit more of their time, and that can bring in a little bit of money, and some of them don't bring in much money, but kind of low impact, fun stuff, things to get the town.
That's what we really want to try and do,
Including, one of the big things that she said is one of the easiest things to do, and that brings in the most money, is food trucks. And she gave me a whole layout on how to do
Remember?
it simply,
Remember?
so, which I know is one of Tom's favorites.
Food truck
But
rodeo.
this is something if, that really we need somebody else, and so I would be
Yeah,
happy.
no, I would,
So plus one.
And I, again, being new, another question. One of the things that I'd like to see us, and maybe it's in the capital improvement in or the transportation, is extension of the bikeway or bike lanes down New River Inlet Road. Would that be part of Parks and Recreation, the recreation
No.
part, or is that?
CIP.
Being worked.
DOT.
We call that the Mike Way. not the bike
It's
way.
actually on there's a transportation committee, which I'm on with Onslow County. So that is in there. There's other things to do I know that Tom has talked to one of the congressmen about it,
Phil Shepherd,
Phil Shepherd.
and that was a while ago.
And it is on the radar of the Onslow County Transportation,
the DOT.
DOT,
Yeah.
I should say
Yeah.
DOT. The DOT, right now, funding is a little bit
Well, what-
crazy.
I did get a chance to speak with one of them, one of the members, and what they're doing for us right now is a study to see how much it would cost to just do like what we have on Island Drive. So it's not gonna be this huge thing,
No.
but just getting it widened.
Right, and I talked about that with, I can't think of her name, and really thought that that was the way to go, because we could
Yeah.
get the funding for that easier. Plus, it is equitable on both ends of town, so you don't have one side of the town just having the share the road, and then the other side having a glorious bike path the whole way down. To have it so that it is,
And we have some challenges space-wise.
we have 9 bridges
Yeah.
to cross going that way.
Okay, well, transportation was my
Well,
background, so I'd like to help. I mean, was my
we
professional
back
career.
that?
All right, well, yep,
so-
let's
Can we
stay.
back into Park and Rec?
Yes.
Okay.
I will send, just before we leave that, I will send you a copy of the study that was done in 2016 that lays out the multi-use path from Town Park to the ORV.
Okay.
So you can see what's in there.
I just wanted to mention on Parks and Rec that we have a citizen in town, lives at the St. Moritz, Nicole Schmidt. She also owns the Crooked Lotus with her husband, who's an active duty master sergeant at MARSOC. She's one of the driving forces behind the Sunset and the Ferry series of events in the summer. And she has spoken up and has volunteered to help the town. I think all we need to do is go ask her, and I know you know
I don't know.
Nicole.
She also-
Connie does.
She also is the driving force with the Rotary for the shrimp dip that we do at New Year's.
So maybe,
Our answer to the dolphin dip.
maybe we go visit her and take an application with us for the Parks and Rec Committee.
Well, and she is,
I'm not joking.
no, being with the Rotary, she said the Rotary is very interested in doing things with the town.
Good.
That might be a real good link it all together kind of thing.
Well, and so did I can never remember, the Chamber of Commerce is willing to help us as well. Okay, just making some notes. So we'll circle back to that one for names. Revetment Committee,
The revetment committee has been in place since the plaintiff sued the town over construction of revetment. I think the revetment committee first started in 2016 or 2017, within a year of when the thing was constructed.
The revetment committee was actually a requirement of the settlement, and when the settlement was signed was when the revetment committee was created, which was in 17.
Okay, and so we've essentially accomplished nothing in those intervening 5 years.
and And I know that those meetings need to keep moving. I know we're struggling a little bit as far as making progress, not from a town perspective, but just from a committee perspective. And I do want to volunteer to replace Mr. Benson on that committee because he's got, now with BISAC and everything else, you've got enough going on, so.
Anyone's off.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, you
I
know.
kind of do and I kind of don't, but I really need to get off of it for a while.
Well, you're right there. And I mean, if we need something, we can call you. And when it comes time to walk the ground, in the few and far between times that we do, you know, I'll come by and get you. And we'll go walk the ground with the plaintiffs. And, you know, off doesn't mean out. You still live up there. You
Well, and
still have a
plus-
vested interest in it. But, you know, you look at this thing and there's a whole lot of Alderman Mike Benson on it that probably ought to be adjusted out, you know, because you've done a lot of work. And
Okay, so I'm gonna move on from revetment. Okay, and Mike and I have talked about this a little bit too, and I do think that as far as the revetment committee, that we may have some ideas brought to us from the BISAC committee.
well,
So we'll see. But
Given-
it's all
given-
beach, you
yeah,
know?
but given that our charter was mandated due to legal settlement, we don't have a lot of wiggle room.
No, I
No,
understand.
we were talking about alternatives, not the
Okay.
revetment itself.
Right,
Okay.
yeah, not the revetment
But
itself.
let's also remember, to Tom's point, that this committee, you know, let's be very careful that we are following the legal settlement we have.
Yes.
And that we're not trying to do something outside of that
Right.
settlement. Because all that's gonna do is get us right back into the box with this thing. Because in my opinion, this has turned into more of a legal issue than anything else. Because
is.
you've got a legal document that.
It's been for
defines-
2 years. We've been waiting on liability waivers for 2 years. and
Right,
we
so my
still
point
haven't
there,
What,
Mike, is it's not going back with any kind of solutions and
No.
stuff. The first thing is making sure we follow
Yes.
what council tells us.
One of the things, as a final point, one of the things I always try to do, and have always done for the time I was on it, was before a meeting, I'll sit down, I have about 5 paper copies of that settlement, and I'll sit down and I'll read it before I come to the meeting, just to kind of refocus on what the specifics are of, you know, what the committee is there to do and not do. And it's pretty specific in terms of layout. There's, you know, we're all of our movements are mandated and chartered by a settlement agreement.
Right.
Exactly.
In any future
Playbook.
meetings that are scheduled, the town attorney will be
Yeah.
invited and present.
Yes.
I agree, 100%.
The
That's
next
actually
one
where I
I
was
think
going with
is probably an easier conversation, and I do not want to be the liaison to Camp Lejeune. I don't think I'm the right person to be that. I know that Alderman Leonard has done that for many, many, many years.
Yep.
And I know, Mr. Grant, you had mentioned that you had gone to some of those functions when Tom was off the board, and you enjoyed that as well.
Yeah, but that was just being invited to,
Yeah.
you know, different things and stuff.
You know,
I don't
having been to
expect-
those, having been to those as the guy who's still in a uniform and is being told by the general that you will be there, because that's how it goes. I can tell you that not a lot of businesses, it's not designed to get business done.
Right.
And you might make another meeting. My situation is being as involved with the retired community as I am here. I'm on the retiree council at the base. We've got a group that gets together socially once a month. We usually have a guest speaker. Our guest speaker night before last was the new base sergeant major, a guy named Ryan Gnecco. And I met with him and gave him my card after the meeting. I explained to him how grateful we were as a town for the help that we received for being able to refuel our vehicles at the Courthouse Bay Fuel Farm when during Florence, when due to all the patrolling and stuff that was done, that we were literally running out of gas. And he and I have a relationship, and from years past, he's also going to get me a brick from the last building that I served in that's being torn down. But I'd like to take that as a lead, and I'd welcome any other alderman, since the mayor doesn't want to do it, but I'd like to have that, obviously.
Just,
So
go
with
ahead, Mike.
say for the last year, I have been attending those elected official meetings at at Camp Lejeune, and I definitely want to continue to be involved. At the June meeting, I was able to speak directly on behalf of the town to request that the rigging on the shrimp boat be taken down as a community service project by the Corps. Got the general's attention to that, followed up with that at their luau a couple weeks later, had a sidebar with him. He looked me in the eye and he said, "You know, I know exactly what you're talking about because I went out on a fishing expedition. I saw that rigging, and we're going to see if we can't take care of it for you." Well, it turned out that they couldn't. But
could've
at
told you
least
that.
we've
could've
got
told the general
we've
that,
got
right.
the general's attention.
Well, I mean, just two comments. One is, everybody gets invited to those things, they're public
Right.
things. So I would encourage anybody that's not been to them.
Yeah.
They're actually very nice.
And the food's good.
But the second thing is, and this doesn't just relate to this, is as a board, and, you know, Mayor, I look to you as being the one that is the contact with most of this stuff, right? How do we make sure that the message, for example, when I go to the Onslow County board meetings, generally, I'm not there taking a position on anything, okay, unless the board has said to me, go do this. How do we make sure that the message that Rick is going out there is the message of this board and not just Rick's message? Because, I mean, not just for that Onslow County, but for the Marine Corps, for legislative and things like that. I mean, I think we know what we're doing, but
Well,
I'm
we're
not
gonna
sure we
ta-
have something.
Well, we're gonna talk about goals.
That's
at the-
where I was
so-
going with it.
and
Yep.
So I think that the messages should tie back to what our goals are gonna be for the year. And then if there's any question, then certainly we need to communicate with each other as a board and make sure we're, and from an Onslow County, that's a little bit easier because I get those meeting invites too, so I see what the agendas are. And if it looks like there's gonna be anything that I feel like I need to go to as well,
And you have.
you know, yeah, I've
Yeah,
got
I mean,
some.
I just look at it this way, I mean, it's, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but the reality of that is, you go to 2 meetings a month.
It's a presence, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
being there, and they say, you know, Mr. Grant's here, all right, and if they've got something to talk to us about,
You're there?
I'm there. But basically, you're just sitting in the audience, I'm not, you know, the only time I ever got up and made a comment was when Jack asked me to speak in favor of their budget, you know, and so, other than that, it's just showing up, but it's 2 times, and the evening meetings, for anybody that wants to go there, sometimes go 3 or 4 hours, so.
Yeah, and then you got some travel time to and from. It's a commitment and a half. It
Another
really is.
Yes, sir.
Another point on Camp Lejeune is, in those elected official meetings, most of the county commissioners are there, and it's a great opportunity to network with them as well as with the military personnel.
Just to clarify, the meetings that I was talking about, where you're ordered to be there when you're an active duty person in uniform, are not those meetings.
Right.
They're the social events.
All the invites. that
All
we
the
get.
invites, you will be there and you will have a smile on your face. Yeah, but yeah.
Okay, sorry, go ahead.
The legislative liaison, these, in my opinion, are the annual meetings that we've been holding to try and get the needs out and expressed for North Topsail Beach. And those meetings are typically led by Mr. McIntyre. And I definitely do need to stay on that and want to, but certainly welcome another member. I know Mike helped me this year, and Tom, you did previously.
I'd like to go back on that. I have personal contact with Ray Celeste up in Congressman Murphy's office. Mike Lazar's personal friend. Phil Shepard, although he was no longer our representative, was a personal friend. For those that don't know, Phil Shepard's mother passed away earlier this week.
Oh, I did not know that.
The services were Wednesday. I couldn't get there. I did call him on behalf of both my family and the town and offer our condolences. I know I sent the pictures out in an email to everyone after the retiree birthday ball at Camp Lejeune, where Senator Lazar was our guest of honor. He served 4 years in the Marine Corps as an enlisted man in the 80s, and when they said escort the senator, I thought that meant come to the door with a drink and walk him around till he felt comfortable. I didn't realize I was going to be in the ceremony standing next to him. But I will tell you that within 10 minutes of him getting there, he asked me in so many words, what can I do for North Topsail Beach? And I was, and I told him I've been back on the board for 3 days. But I did mention that a couple of years ago, he had sponsored legislation to remove language from the state books regarding the ability to, regarding the prohibition on use of state funds for hardened structures. So basically, where we left it was I would get back up with him, and we would have lunch or something and sit down and informally talk about what he could do to help the town. And, that will obviously be extracted from whatever goals we get, but I am very interested in, because of my contacts, being that person.
Just for the record, though, you just signed up for 3 committees in a row. We talked about clean slate, parking, Camp Lejeune, and legislative.
Yeah, but I didn't sign up for Parks and Rec.
So.
That would be 4.
No, I did not.
Yes,
So-
sir.
But Rick, that's kind of where, when I went through this list, and I'm sorry, sir, but I need to respond to that. When I went through this list, and I'd already made up my own list
Right.
prior to that pretty much mirrored that, and I thought, where can I best benefit the board and the town? It was in those, and that's pretty much, out of all of them, that's where I'm at. That's where I'm at.
My comment, Tom, is a simple one. We can't start with a clean slate and then have everybody blocked. Everybody,
I
I
see
think
what you're saying.
what I'm saying is we go back through this one by one, people ought to say what they're,
Yeah,
and
that's
again,
what
that's
we're gonna do.
my suggestion.
That's what we're
All
gonna
right,
do.
so this line item needs to say state and federal legislative liaison, because I was totally faked out about what you were talking about until you
Okay,
mentioned what you mentioned, Mayor.
okay.
And a lot of this goes through the Shoreline Protection Commission, so we really have to work through and keep the chairman of the Shoreline Protection Commission, Steve Smith, informed if we're making sidebar contacts with Connie Wilson or Mike McIntyre, so that, because the Shoreline Protection Commission is actually the one that negotiates with these 2 advocates in Raleigh and for Washington, even though the towns pay for their services. So we need to go through channels when we ask for things in Raleigh or Washington.
Do we get that from the other members of that committee?
What do you
You're
mean?
talking about with Topsail and Shoreline, we're not the only town on there.
Right.
No,
So my question, right, so my question is, does Surf City, if they go to Raleigh to ask for something, do they let us know? I mean, I have
No,
no
they
problem
don't.
with
Not us, they let the chair of the Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission know.
But
on
they don't
everything?
always communicate back to us.
They don't tell us
Okay.
necessarily.
That's the point.
No, my question is,
Well,
I think we
why
ought to
should
be sharing that, but this goes back to we
Why
talked
not?
about with grant
I
writing.
mean,
Okay, if we're writing a grant application and we know that other towns on the island are for that, we have to look out for the town first, is my
Yeah.
point. And-
Well-
And whether that 100% aligns with Topsail Island shoreline protection or not, the town's got to come first.
that's not what
my
I'm
only
saying. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying we need to keep the chair informed of our actions. We don't need consensus from the Shoreline Protection Commission for us to take a specific need to our legislative liaisons.
Okay, I'm gonna move on.
Yeah.
Outside agencies.
Before we go there, let's move up to, down to Topsail Island Shoreline Protection Commission, because it needs to go up under town appointed.
Okay.
Because the town does appoint the members, representatives from the town to the Shoreline Protection Commission. And as you'll recall, we tabled the discussion of the proposal to change the format in which the board appoints members, representatives to the Shoreline Protection Commission. And for the new members, this was based on the fact that we now have a BISAC committee, and the other 2 towns appoint 2 members of their BISAC committee and 1 elected official to represent their town on the Shoreline Protection Commission. And the proposal that we tabled was to do that same thing, so that we have buy-in from the BISAC committee and liaison from the BISAC committee to the Shoreline Protection Commission. So the discussion is, do we change the format in which we appoint representatives to the Shoreline Protection Commission? And I say, yes, we should, to be in line with the fact that we now have a BISAC committee, and this board is looking for recommendations from the BISAC committee for action. And so the BISAC committee needs to be tuned in to the Shoreline Protection Commission to know what's going on island-wide, statewide, and with the federal government.
But that's also an open meeting that anybody on the
It is.
BISAC committee can go
And
to.
and to be
correct?
honest, right, and to be honest, there are elected officials that regularly attend that meeting sitting in the audience. So just to your point, anyone that wants to be present at that meeting on this board can be there. And as Fred will tell you, there's one particular councilman from Surf City that's there pretty regularly. There's another council commissioner from Topsail Beach that's there either online or in person every month. I'm not naming names, but they're there. So it's not something that you're excluded from participating in. Sitting up in front at the table with the group, we really don't vote on that many motions. It's not like we're voting on motions. It's more of a consensus discussion anyway, so you're part of the discussion. So all
So I
I'm
guess
saying
that's-
is,
I'm going around
I'm
to
going
discuss.
around circles here, but my point is, are we going to change up the way we appoint representatives to Shoreline Protection Commission? I say yes, we should.
I will submit to you that the two other towns in the commission have different needs and different requirements than the town of North Topsail Beach. Neither one of them have areas in Cobra. Neither one of them have an inlet that's causing the problems that our inlet is causing our town. I see two elected officials on the commission from North Topsail Beach with one person from BISAC, and that person who is on the commission from BISAC, because we get three, right? We get three.
We can have all
All right, just checking and making sure that nothing changed. But we get three. We have two electeds. We have the citizen at large is from BISAC, and there is no reason why that individual cannot bring what BISAC is working on or what BISAC's recommendations are to the Shoreline Protection Commission. Doesn't take two.
If I can weigh in too, I'm opposed to Mike's, he knows this, for a couple of reasons. We've had a real problem with BISAC staying in their lane, okay? And so, you know, we're rewriting the guidelines as we talked about. I think that you're better off having two of us on here for a couple of reasons. One is, I know that BISAC is a new committee and it's supposed to be able to have, you know, the knowledge and stuff, but I think it's also important that the aldermen are involved in that stuff as well. And so, you know, my feeling is I'd rather stick with the two aldermen, and again, anybody's welcome to attend those things. So.
Yeah, I just don't see why there is opposition to conforming and giving the BISAC committee a greater recognition for what they're trying to do. If you don't want the BISAC committee to be active at the state and federal level, then maybe that's what you're saying. By going this route, you're saying that this board should be the body that is worried about coastal matters at state and federal. And we're right back in the same boat where we were before we had BISAC, because this board is the beach committee.
But the BISAC committee, in my opinion, is still coming up to speed and learning. So if there's going to be representation at the Shoreline Protection Commission, I personally, and this is just my opinion, am more comfortable at this particular moment having it be from our board.
Well, think about it like this. The members of the BISAC committee have 3 or 2-year terms. There are 3 members of this board that have less than a 1-year term left. So they may not be around in December of 2023 to continue serving with the Shoreline Protection
I'm gonna let
Commission.
Connie, then I've got.
Connie's got something to say.
I agree with the mayor. I understand exactly what you're saying, but I do think that the committee is still new enough and to get up to speed. And at this time next year, if we don't have the board members who are on it right now or who are going to be there, we can always change it next year, but since it's such a new committee, relatively new committee, I would feel more comfortable keeping it with 2 representatives from the board and 1 representative from BISAC.
The other thing too is, I gotta tell you, I fundamentally disagree with what Mike just said in terms of what the obligation of this committee is. This committee is not supposed to be interacting with federal and state agencies, full stop. Okay, it's one thing to get the information, Mike, and I don't think that's what you're saying.
You're changing my terms. I didn't say interact, I said liaison, learn.
What does
by
liaison
being-
mean?
All right.
The BISAC committee is not liaison with Connie Wilson or Mike McIntyre. That's not the purpose of the BISAC committee.
I agree, but the word liaison doesn't infer looking at stuff. Liaison means interacting with.
It does.
Mike.
Exactly.
Okay?
It does.
So
That's what
I guess my question is, to clarify, please, Mike, to clarify, if we were to change the makeup of the town's representatives to Shoreline Protection Commission, who's going to Washington and who's going to Raleigh? Is it the mayor and an alderman? Or is it the mayor and somebody from BISAC? I mean, you know, what is your definition here?
Here's who's going to Raleigh in March of 2023. Mayor McDermott and Alderman Tom Leonard.
That hasn't been decided yet, but
No,
that's fine.
but
Whoever's else on the.
That's my recommendation.
Okay.
That would be my
All right,
recommendation.
so-
You asked me. You
so
just
where's-
did. You
Well, I
just
did,
asked me for a
okay.
recommendation.
No, I didn't ask for a recommendation. I'm trying to define, get your definition of what liaison means.
It says communication or cooperation which facilitates a close working relationship between people or organizations.
And that would be board, that would be the board
Yeah.
members.
Okay, all right, so we're there.
I'm throwing up the white flag, so let's move on.
Okay, all right.
Okay. All right, now, we're going to come back up to a nice lighter note, which would be the Chamber of Commerce. Connie, you've been the one that's been attending those meetings for North Topsail Beach. I think they're taking, what, about an hour a month, maybe?
They take about an hour a month. There are quite a few other events that they have throughout the month. Sometimes I attend them, sometimes I do not, depending on, I hate to say how important, because, you know, different things are more important than others. Whoever does this, whether it's me or somebody else, the time commitment is really what you make it. There's a lot of good networking involved in this, and just being out there. Now, for the last couple months, I've had some personal issues, and I've had to do it by Zoom, or you can always send in the town reports by email. But they're an easy committee, but I do think they're not like the liaisons for the legislature, but it's still important to keep the
I think it
town-
is, and I think it will tie in nicely with Parks and Rec, you know, so I do think we need to stay involved there. Okay, Tom Leonard, we've got Byways Board of Director.
He's got a term there that.
Yeah, you've got a term, so we don't really need to talk about that one then.
Not really, no.
Okay, and then on WASA Board of Directors, I'm sitting on that one, and I think it's appropriate that I stay there. That's also about an hour it's an hour a month maybe for the meeting, but there's email and communication that happens every week as well on that one.
Who was sitting on that, just as a sidebar? Who was sitting on that from the Board of Commissioners? Was it Jack?
No,
Okay.
we've got Royce and we've
Okay.
got Tim. Okay, and then we've got Onslow County Board of Commissioners. We talked about this one
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah, what happens there, though, is when the mayor sees something that she wants to, then, you know, either I'll pass it on or whatever, but basically, I would call it more of a passive role. The one exception was asking for money for Ocean City, which they gave us. But generally, it's there to keep the relationship going and all that kind of stuff. I mean, it's up, anybody can go to those meetings. What I would
If they're
suggest you
open.
do is take a look at the agenda, because there may be things that I go to. I mean, I'm happy to do that because I get my wife to go with me, and when the lunch, and the one that's 11 o'clock, I take her to lunch is how I get her to go. But the evening meetings, for those of you that don't want to drive at night and stuff, it's a pain in the butt because some of those go 3 and 4 hours.
So are you signing up for that?
I'm doing it, but I think, with the new chairman there, Tim.
Clean slate, clean
Yeah,
slate.
yeah. No, I agree.
All right, and then the next one is the DOT committee, and I know Mr. Fontana has already expressed some interest in there because of his past life, and I'm not sure, Connie, that would upset you too much.
It wouldn't upset me, like Mr. Grant said about the last one, this is more of a passive role, but I believe it's very important to be there, or if you can't attend in person, at least show up on the Zoom meetings, just to keep our town and our town's interest.
And our
in the
bike lane.
Yes, and our bike lane
And
in
our
the
bike lane.
forefront of everybody's minds, yeah.
Can I ask a question? Is this the RPO or the MPO, or is it a separate committee completely?
So, it's actually broken into two committees, with the representatives being on one, and town,
Right, the TCC is sort of the employees, staff.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
TAC is elected officials. Yeah, I've been on both ends, but,
okay.
but
So
is
we,
it the MPO or is it the RPO?
we actually discussed both of them.
Okay,
We have representatives from a lot of the different agencies come and talk to us every month, and we just recently got a new interactive dashboard that's showing us what's going on everywhere. So it's a lot, but I imagine that you'd understand a lot of what.
and the reason I ask is because the last I understood, North Topsail Beach was going to be part of the Jacksonville Metropolitan Planning Organization. So that's the MPO.
MPO.
And the RPO, which is the rural part, I didn't know if we attended those as well. So it's really, and this seems to be a third meeting completely.
This is kind of, so, like I said, it's a lot, but they try to bring everything together, for the elected officials and,
Okay.
and
Yeah,
representatives.
no, I've been
and-
very, and you go over the Transportation Improvement Program and all
Yeah.
that fun stuff, yeah.
Yeah,
that
it's
one I-
really eye-opening on a lot of things, and sometimes, you get blown away by just the needs that are out there. In Onslow County, there's a lot of needs and there's a little bit of money. And so just the way that everything's put
Yeah.
together, but there's different pots, as you know, different pots of money that comes out for funding, but it is, it's a really eye-opening,
Yeah, I
important.
definitely want to be on that one. Good.
Okay, all right, we're gonna walk back and try and get names assigned now.
Before we go.
Yes, sir.
Wait a minute. we're
Before
not
we
done.
go,
Yeah.
hang on. One thing that's not on here, it's not a board or a committee, but it's a duty that we assign to or volunteer for as board members, which is signing checks. Do we want to add that to the list of
I'm signing them now, it doesn't matter to me. I think.
who else is signing them? We usually have two.
Mike and
I've been-
I think you used to. think
I used to. I would just offer up that, and I think you'll both concur with this, that it's a real eye-opener where the money goes. It's like sitting it down at the kitchen table years ago and signing checks for the house. And it's something I think everybody ought to, at some point in time, ought to do. You get to see what the cell phone bill is and what the
I
Onwassa.
don't think I get to, I don't get to do that, though,
No,
right?
but it's usually a board member, but I would suggest that maybe Fred think about it. I know we've already talked about it, you don't want to do it, but just as a newcomer, I think it's something everybody ought to take a turn doing just because of the enlightenment that comes from it. And if he doesn't want to do it, and either one of you doesn't want to do it anymore, I'd be happy to do it
Well,
again.
yeah,
So
we
is
need to add this as one of the one of our items to our list of committees. And we do need to have 3 people doing it, just for, just
So we're really
for,
creating a finance committee.
no, it's not,
No.
not at all.
You show up and
Not
you,
at all.
and you go through the folder
Yeah.
and you sign the
You
checks.
verify
do that.
that it's,
We don't need another committee.
no, it's not a
Okay.
committee. You
So,
verify
but the only
that
two
the
right now
check
are
can
Mike
be
and I, right?
signed.
So it'd just be Mike, and myself, and Fred, and then
Yeah,
we rotate off after a year or something?
yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah. I can do that.
Be one less thing you gotta do. It'd be one less thing you
Yeah, but
gotta
what happens
do.
is it'll be 1 week, only 1 week, Mike.
Oh.
And then if I'm out of town, you'll set-
If there's 3 people want to do it.
Okay, I'm gonna step back up
Wait,
then and try and
there's,
keep
we're
us
we're
moving.
not finished yet with our list. There are some other liaison activities that we need to recognize that this board is participating in. The first one is the Coastal Resources Commission quarterly meetings. I've been attending those off and on regularly. It's like, you all mentioned, it's more of a passive thing. It's being there, but it's an opportunity to network with the DCM officials like Ken Wilkerson and Tancred Miller and some of the other people besides Braxton Davis. So I think that's an important liaison role to recognize.
Mike, before we leave that, what, do you actually, where's the is it a physical meeting?
Yes, it's a physical meeting.
And where's it at?
It rotates around. I think that it was in Beaufort in November. January meeting, I'm not sure where it's going to be. But we're going to
It's not-
have,
it's
we're
not-
actually going to have that, it's going to meet in Topsail Beach in 2/23, I don't know when.
Okay, that's all I was asking, so it's a.
That's the power, that's the prestige, the recognition that Steve Smith has with the coastal community. Just like he got the DOT, I'm getting sidetracked. The next one is the Division of Water Resources, the long-term shallow draft memorandum of agreement. That, again, is a quarterly meeting. It used to be in person, but the last year since COVID, it's been a virtual meeting. I've been attending those on a regular basis to keep up with goings-on with the state and federal shallow draft aspect. And then the last one that we need to add, in my opinion, is the Army Corps Environmental Impact Study Liaison. The manager, the mayor, and myself have been having monthly calls with Mickey Sugg, who is the regulatory director for regulatory programs in the Wilmington District of the Army Corps of Engineers, to keep him on track with the EIS, because it has been a very slow process, if you want to call it a process. And so I think we just, if we're recognizing what board members are doing, then we need to recognize this role. And we're going to have to continue our monthly calls with him forever. So it's not something that's going to go away anytime soon.
Okay, I've got those.
Just a real quick question, Mayor. We talked about having a master calendar out for people, because I'm looking at the shallow draft stuff. If that's a call, if you know about it, anybody can participate in something like that.
Right.
But the other one, where you've got something where it's in Beaufort or something like that, that's a completely different animal to go to something like that. I mean, I assume it's an open meeting that anybody could go to if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But I think master calendar stuff, I think some of this stuff, I would say, Mayor, is, Connie is the contact. Okay, but she's, on her calendar, she says, hey, here's the sign-in stuff for anybody that wants to participate in something like that. 'Cause I think that would help a lot, because then also the information gets spread to us better. Does that make sense?
Before we move past those, I'm thinking especially the first two, and a question more than a comment. What about involving our BISAC in both the
CRC
CRC
and the
meetings
division.
and the DWR meetings?
Well, I was actually gonna suggest our beach engineer get involved in that stuff. He's probably involved in it anyway.
Yeah,
But
but-
that's the expertise.
I don't know.
You don't think that he knows about the shallow draft more than anybody at this table, Mike?
Oh, well, I thought you were talking about
I think he's answering my
CRC.
question.
I thought you were talking about the CRC.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I'm just thinking, we're trying to involve them in all aspects of our
But again, it is an
Yeah.
open meeting, so they
Yeah.
can go.
Yeah, but I'm just wondering if that couldn't take a little bit of the load off the board at the same time. Something to think about, Mike.
I
I'm gonna
think-
keep going to the CRC
Right.
meetings when I can.
All right, we're
What-
gonna-
What I was gonna say on that one, Tom, just real briefly, is let's figure out what the goals are we have for BISAC before I mean, open meetings are fine to let people know what open meetings are, but I think we need to give specific direction, which we've talked about, to BISAC. It's not fair for them to be wandering around without knowing what this board wants to do.
Well, you know, it's something to consider as you're going through your process too, then.
Right, and that needs to be part of the January.
Can we take about a
board.
5-minute break before
Yeah,
we
we
continue,
can do a
Mayor?
5-minute break, and then we're gonna get names next to each one.
Okay.
The BISAC committee, we said we are not changing because those were appointed terms. The CIP committee for the capital improvements, is there anybody who is
Would you like to
interested?
wait for Alderman Plettle to come back, Mayor?
I said I'm starting, she had 5
No?
minutes. I can revisit it.
Huh?
I can revisit it.
How about we just wait for Connie to come
We
back?
can.
Okay, that would be the right thing to do.
Well, the ones, we could talk about the ones that aren't changing, though. As I said, the state mandated ones, those top 3 are not changing.
You got a bus to catch?
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff to do
I'll start a
today.
meeting at 11 o'clock.
All right,
Another
just,
town manager.
just for the record, Mayor, since you brought that up, is I don't think who's appointed to terms and stuff, we already had this discussion.
Right.
Everybody's gonna be at will, okay, on committees and stuff.
Oh,
So
that's
I have
right.
no problem with saying, we can leave, Connie on this one or Rick on that one, but let's
like a
not
sign-up
talk about
sheet.
terms, because I
Okay.
think that's gonna be a problem. Because every time we get a new board, it's gonna be a problem. Rick just
Okay.
got appointed for 3 years to a committee, and now we got 3 new board members.
No.
Okay.
So, sorry, go ahead.
So we're gonna do this every year.
Yeah, we should do this every year.
It should be part of the organizational meeting.
Mike,
Yes.
next year, we may have different board members.
Okay, so Connie, we're just gonna keep moving. So we're not talking about the first 3 because those are set. The town appointed, so is there gonna be any changes then to the BISAC committee? Is there any additional interest?
You just appointed new members plus.
But we just said.
Talking about the liaisons.
Yeah, he's talking about the.
Mike
I would-
Benson and Rick Grant.
Okay, just so we know, I would like to continue to serve on that at least for another year, to make, from a directional standpoint. I don't know if anybody else is interested, but right now, I wouldn't mind serving again on that one.
I'm fine with that. Anybody else have a burning
I
desire?
think I need to continue.
Well, since you started it, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, you started it.
The capital improvements committee, is there any additional interest in this one?
Fred?
I wouldn't mind being on there.
That was a consensus, yes, I'm sorry.
I wouldn't mind being on that one.
Okay,
Does that mean someone has to come off?
well, we can
You
only
have
have
to, otherwise
2.
you got a quorum.
Okay.
All right, well, I'll step away from that.
You sure? All right.
Yep. All right,
Rick
so,
is the finance guy.
so for capital improvements, we're gonna have Alderman Fontana and Rick.
Yep. Yeah. Parking committee, I can come off.
I would like to stay on the parking committee.
I think you should.
I'd like to go on it.
Okay, so for parking committee, it's gonna change to Alderman Plettle and Alderman Leonard. Parks and Rec, I would like to join this with Connie. I don't know, Connie, if you have the desire to stay on it as well, or if you want somebody else to.
I will unless somebody else wants to.
Okay.
You see my hand not going up.
Yeah.
I will help Connie. We'll get it moving.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
The revetment committee, I would like to join this, as I had mentioned earlier, and replace, Mayor Pro Tem Benson.
Okay.
Tom, you wanted to stay on that one?
Yeah, I'll stay on it.
Is there anybody, okay, everybody's
And
good?
if nobody else wanted it, with my background, I just think that's become more of a legal
I don't know
matter
if we
issue.
need 3 attorneys at the meeting.
That's fine.
This is true.
It could be a problem.
This is true. A very good point, Joanne.
It could be a problem with notification of a spatial committee, because if you have 3 aldermen present, you have to notify as a public meeting so many days ahead of time, and that's not way that the revetment committee has worked in the past, even though the last meeting we did have an audience.
I was here at the last one, so what I would say is if they are, I came.
Well-
I mean, you can sit, it's an open meeting.
For the purposes of what we're trying to do here, we're substituting a name. So
Yes.
there's no numerical overall change. Okay?
Camp Lejeune liaison, I think we talked about a couple things here, but for all the social events, I definitely do agree and would like Alderman Leonard to continue to do that. If there's a reason that I need to go to a special meeting, I don't mind doing that.
I
I'm
will
fine
let you
staying
know.
on there with you.
Okay.
But I would, I'm probably
Okay.
not gonna be the one at the social events.
I would also suggest,
The
I
social
think Tom
events
would do
are-
this too, is
yeah.
I would encourage people, when you get an invitation, like we went to the 4th of July thing, you may not want to go to everything, but everybody, as a board member, you're going to get an invitation for that stuff. I would suggest, if nothing else, Tom, and you've been dealing with this a lot, is go to a couple of them just to get the feel for what's going on.
Well, the other thing to follow that up, if you get an invitation to one of those things and you're not going to go, they ask for an RSVP. Please RSVP, because what somebody's doing in some office at Camp Lejeune is trying to tabulate numbers, especially for the, not so much 4th of July, but the, you know, the spring reception. They're trying to figure out how much food to buy. Okay? Those that everybody gets an invite to, I enthusiastically follow up your statements. You need to go. You need to smile. You need to be there. You need to have a name tag on that you're representing the town, and understand that it's a social event.
Just one follow-up item, and maybe you know this, Tom. I get email invitations to these
They
things.
come both ways.
Both.
Right, but I'm just saying, I mean, I would assume, I don't know if you get those, Fred, but we gotta make sure that you
No.
get the email invitation.
Well, I get some, I got, every once in a while I get something, but I would like a name tag. If you all got name tags.
I don't have.
So I will continue attending as when they have the elected officials luncheon.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm not going to
With me.
social things because I'm not going out after dark, but
Okay.
So
We
for
can go
camp-
those together.
So should we add another item here? So there's the Camp Lejeune liaison for social events, and then there's the Camp Lejeune elected official quarterly
Lunch.
meeting?
yeah,
And then, so for
No,
the,
no, because the social events, everybody gets invited to.
yeah.
You go or you don't go,
Yeah.
okay?
A special thing for that.
Yeah, so we're still back to the liaison being the person that would attend the luncheons and make the phone calls and talk to people at the base.
so then, Mike, are you saying you would like to replace me on this? Because we've already got Alderman Leonard here, and I'm
Yeah.
okay with that, so if
Yeah.
you would like to do that.
Yeah.
So
But
for
you
Camp
should be-
Lejeune.
You should be going with us when you can to elected official luncheons.
Right, but so for the Camp Lejeune liaison, it will be Mike and Tom.
Yes,
We all, yeah,
it's still a social thing.
we all should
Okay.
be going, really, to be honest.
All Board of Aldermen receive invitations for any
Yeah.
event. They, whenever there's a change of the board, they get sent the new members and their email addresses so that they have your contact information.
Thank you.
The legislative liaison, I am definitely would like to stay on here, and if I had to guess, yes.
I want that.
Is there any concern or anybody else who's interested? Okay, so that will be myself and
Okay.
Alderman Leonard. The Chamber of Commerce, right now, we've got Ms. Plettle. Is that something you want to stay on, Connie, or?
I can stay on if nobody else would like to do it. It's an important thing, but there is a lot to it. I feel like somebody else might be able to attend more of the,
Yeah, I wouldn't
The ribbon
mind,
cuttings?
I wouldn't mind being the
Okay.
chamber
Okay.
person.
all right. You'll like it, and they're a good group of people.
Just get me on the mailing list, or,
Okay, so we'll switch that one out. Tom is appointed to the Board of Directors for Byways, so,
Yep.
yeah, we're not talking about that one. I would like to keep the Onwassa Board. I think that's important from a consistency perspective. The Board of Commissioners, right now, we've got Alderman Grant, and I think you've been doing a great job just keeping the relationship on a positive note along with Ms. Darian. So I personally don't want to see that change unless somebody else has a burning desire. And again, they're open meetings, so, I mean, you could still.
Well, the other thing I would suggest is take a look at, they post the agendas.
Yep.
And if there's something on there, just send a note out. Because basically, it's pretty passive unless, you know, it's generally when they come to me to ask for something, so.
And the DOT, we had Fred volunteered for that one. And I didn't see anybody crying over not getting the DOT. And we've already talked about the Shoreline Protection Commission, right?
Well, we haven't decided who's going to be the elected officials.
Okay,
I think Mike needs to be that. You're the expert in that
Well,
area.
So,
He's the vice chair.
yeah,
as
I really need to stay with it.
So,
I wouldn't mind stepping aside if you're only gonna go with
You
one.
want two on there?
you want two?
We're going with two.
Okay, I thought we had decided back to one. We're gonna keep
No.
two, I'll stay on it then.
Okay.
Hey, Mike, how are you, Mike, you're kind of our beach guy now, and when you look at everything on here, you've got a lot of stuff on your plate. Eventually, some of that stuff's gonna have to transition, or at least have a backup. Is Fred gonna be your backup for some of, I mean, you and I are on BISAC, but then you're also,
The
going to these other
CRC,
meetings, you've got
and the-
Topsail Island, you've got
Yeah,
all
well-
this kind of stuff.
The ancillary things that go along with sort of the BISAC and the Shoreline Protection Commission are more like quarterly or just participation events. It's not like you're putting a lot of time other than just, being there at the meeting, so.
Yeah, and the
It's
shoreline
fine. I'm good with
protection, Shoreline Protection Commission, I think we voted to go to a 6-month calendar, or, a
We're
6
go-
meeting.
Right.
A year calendar instead of
Yeah.
every month.
Yeah,
That'll be better.
We're gonna do every other month.
yeah.
And then the items that we added as liaisons, and I think, Rick, this is where you were going. So Mike, you are currently attending the CRC quarterly meetings, the Division of Water Resources quarterly meeting.
Yep.
But those are open to the public, right?
They're open.
They're open to the
yeah.
public.
Okay.
Mhm.
And we've had, in the past, a couple will ride together to those meetings when they were in person, so.
Okay.
And then we do, Mike and I have been the ones as the liaison with Alice trying to get the Army Corps moving along on the EIS.
Oh, Mike.
Probably need.
And I think we need to keep that consistent right now.
Well, I think the calendar's gonna help with a lot of this stuff, because I think
Well,
it's more about people wanting to stay, popping on a Zoom meeting for an hour is not a big deal,
Well, and that was.
right?
from
Driving
a-
to Beaufort for a 2-hour meeting can be a big deal.
So that was the next thing I had, as far as a to-do
It's a whole
list
half
out
a
of
day.
this, is we can have this chart updated, but then if there is a way to somehow get our Outlook calendars populated with when these meetings are,
Yep.
and if we have to send that information in to do that, however we want to do
What we
that.
did
We've
before,
already,
Ricky created that, right?
created the calendar already, so.
So we
you
can
just
add-
fill in your activities in that calendar, everyone.
Okay.
I did.
See it.
I did,
Okay,
So you just have to go.
that I was
over
gone
I
for.
haven't figured it out.
I have a suggestion. I don't know if this is something anybody wants to do, but I think that might be helpful. Some of these appointments are for a single person, and I'm going to use Mr. Grant for the County Board of Commissioners. He's the only one on there. I'm wondering if some of these we might want to have an alternate. The DOT, the grant, the one that Mr. Grant's on, some of these, so that if, say, Mr. Grant is jet setting over to Europe, then somebody else could be the alternate
Yeah,
to go in.
that's a great idea. So the ones that we just have one, that would be the Chamber of Commerce I wouldn't mind being your alternate.
Okay.
for
And I
that.
wouldn't mind being the alternate for the Onslow County Board of Commissioners.
Perfect,
Good.
perfect.
Okay.
And then the only other one we've got then is the DOT. Does anybody, who wants to?
And I
be-
wouldn't mind doing that, since that's what I'm stepping back
backup?
from, so I have information
Okay.
on that.
Connie, can I make a suggestion too? At the
Sure.
next Onslow County Board meeting, why don't we go together?
Okay,
Okay?
all right.
Make them buy lunch.
Tom says I should make you buy me lunch.
Make them buy lunch.
If it's a lunch meeting, we're going to lunch.
All right.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything else before we move off of this?
Checks. What did we decide about signing checks?
The checks, we've got 3 volunteers for the checks. We've got Mike, Rick, and Fred. So unless,
I was also a volunteer.
do you want a 4th volunteer there? Or you
Why
want
don't
to
you,
replace?
why don't you jump off? You've got enough on your plate.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna move, so signing checks will be Rick, Fred, and Tom. Okay, any questions? All right.
Alice will set up getting the signature cards for us
Yeah.
to change signatures.
All right, so then what I wanted to also spend a little bit of time talking about this morning would be, what do we envision our goals for 2023 to be as a board of aldermen? So at the end of the year, we're able to look back and see what we successfully were able to accomplish, and where, we still need to continue working.
Can I make just a stupid question? We're in a fiscal year. Right? So are these going to be calendar year 23 goals? Are they
In my
gonna be-
mind, it was just, I just went
No, I
to
think we have to go
calendar
with
year.
goals, right,
Yeah.
okay.
But if you want it to be fiscal,
Well,
I'm not.
all I'm
opposed to
thinking
that.
about with that is I think we could probably do something short-term for the next 6 months, but I think we need to tie the budget into
Mm-hmm.
whatever our goals are because of the money that we'll be spending. For example, if the firehouse is a goal, we know we've got to have that in the budget, right? So,
So why don't we do goals, we have 6-month timeline on goals, and then we have a 12-month, how about that?
does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, will we also have like a board retreat sometime this spring as well to talk about that and
Yeah, we
tie
can.
more?
Could be part of the budget.
I just didn't want to wait that long,
Right.
yeah, to come up with something. So, Rick, I'm sure you've got a budget goal. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're thinking?
Well, no, I think that what we're gonna have to do from a budget goal is, we have to decide what we're gonna do with the new fire fund. All right, we're gonna have, everybody knows what that is, right? The 3 cents we're getting back from the county, assuming that actually comes in, which I think it will. But I think from budget goal, we need to figure out what we think next year is gonna look like. The other issue we're gonna have to take a look at is inflation. All right, and all those type of things. So, what I was gonna suggest we do on the organizational goals is, if you remember, one of the things that, I don't know if everybody knows or not, one of the things I put on the agenda for January was to give BISAC-specific goals. I think that we need to give that committee and any other committees that we've got specific goals for the year. Like, here's what we want you to accomplish, rather than just a blanket, go and take a look at the beach. Say 3 things that we as a board, and as Mike has pointed out, actually in the BISAC meeting, while we're rewriting the charter actually said that the Board of Aldermen is supposed to give the direction and the goals for the BISAC committee, which we didn't do last year. So for the January meeting, I would suggest anybody that's got things that they want to bring up, do that, in terms of what we should be taking a look at. Because we also can have a budget issue with that too, because I think the more we use Chris, which obviously has paid off for us very well, then we're going to have to money budgets. We've got, if they're going to byways meetings, if we're doing that kind of stuff. But I think in terms of our goals for next year, we're going to have a handle on, and I think I've asked in January, the finance group, Alice is going to tell them where we are to date, as we talked about in our last meeting, so we get an idea, are we over, are we under, what kind of surplus might we have for next year, and what we want to do as a town. I know, Connie, last year we did the budget thing, you said, hey, let's take a look at this for 1 year and then see what's happened. Now, inflation's run rampant, but I don't know how the other numbers are tying out right now in terms of what we're doing.
So, what I heard of your desire for the first 2 goals would be establishing committee goals for BISAC and making that a priority because we've got that committee up and running. And then also just ongoing budget planning.
Yes.
Okay.
Do we want to look at goals for any of the other committees as well?
Yeah.
And see what we have?
Yeah.
All right.
Well,
And
I think, well, a legislative goal could be, and I don't mean to step where Tom and Joanne are, is, you know, what are we gonna do on Cobra? Okay, what are we gonna do, you know, on those type of things?
Yeah.
What are our goals? Because saying we're gonna get legislation passed is not really in our control, but our goal might be simply, we need to go forward with that, we need to push that stuff, we need to have the contacts. And so, what I would think in something like that, if I had been assigned that responsibility as a committee, then the goals of that committee should come back to this board with, here's what we think, you see what I mean?
We need to do
The
that,
goals
yeah.
should come back from the people that are working on the
Yeah.
You're
committee.
right, you're right.
Not the other way around. Does
Right.
that make sense?
Right.
But at the same time, if you have a suggestion as we formulate those goals, or even at this point, you know, we've been banging our head against the wall on Cobra now for decades, and we're no further along than we've ever been before. We were probably the closest in 2020 when we had companion bills running up, you know, in both houses, and then everything stopped when all the legislation began to center on Cobra or COVID. You know, so we're back to square one, other than the fact that we've got people in our congressman's office who are working on it, and we have relationships with, and that our congressman backs it. We've got a new senator, which is probably not a bad thing for this. But we need to figure out, along with our lobbyist, you know, former Congressman McIntyre, what's our strategy? Because going to Washington and walking around and wearing out a pair of shoes it's fun and it's cool and you get to see the Capitol and all that stuff, but you know, it's not gotten us anywhere. And that's really the goal right now. And the 2 goals I had were, that was the other one, and then the remove the Cobra language, or remove the language on at the
Just
state
real
level.
quick, back to, Mayor, you had, and I think Mike had a comment. I'm assuming the way this works is, let's just use that, you and Tom come back.
Yeah.
Put that in front of the board, And then the
Yes.
board takes a look at all the goals for the year, because I think as a board, we need to prioritize what we've got too, right? So I assume that's the way you meant it.
Right now,
work.
I'm just trying to brainstorm what you have as goals, and yes, anybody that's putting goals together for like BISAC, or for the legislative, or for Cobra, that has to come back and be agreed upon by the board, that is our strategy, that we're
Well, and
all
also
on the same
on the
track.
capital thing, you know, if they're looking and said, okay, our goal within this next year is now we need at least one fire truck, we need, you know, that kind of stuff.
That should come back to us.
That should come back to the board as well.
And so to go back to the Cobra thing as an example, you know, the ultimate goal is Cobra removal. That's, to put it in my terms, that's the mission. That's taking the hill. Well, taking the hill has a bunch of tasks associated with taking the hill.
where I'm going exactly.
And while the goal may be removal from Cobra, there are going to be some subtasks that lead up to that. And we need to flesh like an outline, like when you had to do a student outline when you're a kid in
Gantt chart.
school. Yeah. So we got to flesh those out as well.
Agree.
Okay?
So in just a few minutes, we're going to discuss final consensus with our comment letter to Fish and Wildlife 5-year report of the Cobra review. So that is going to be one aspect of keeping our quest to eliminate MAP Unit LO6 in front of congressional representatives. We don't expect Fish and Wildlife to do it. They're not authorized to do it. Congress has to do it. There has to be congressional hearings before that's going to happen. So our mission, I think, in Washington is just to keep our issue front and center with the senators and the congressmen, so when they have an opportunity to testify before these congressional committees that are reviewing Cobra, they'll be ready to go. But until Congress is willing to have these congressional committee reviews, we're at an impasse.
Right, but I think that's the whole point that Tom was saying, is I think for us to sit down today and say, here's all the goals we got, is not gonna work. I think
No.
what you're asking for, Mayor, is everybody that's gone to committee, everybody that's got an assignment come back, you know.
What's your plan?
What's my goal with the county?
We just have to
Okay?
keep
Make
the
sure we
issue
don't get
before
screwed.
Congress,
Right.
that's
Well-
all.
But in general, I think
Yeah.
what we're saying is in general.
Right.
Right, so the other ones that I wanted to add, and it goes back to what you were saying, is I would envision Connie and I being able to come with an update to the January meeting for Parks and Rec. And I
That's
think at the end of the
exactly,
day,
yep.
we need to be able to say we've established a group of people to help get this concert moving along so that we don't miss a step there, and that we would also like to potentially have these other few events or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, and understanding that some of these are going to have more discrete and performance-based goals than others. I mean, liaison to Camp Lejeune is, you know, basically continue to foster a dialogue with key
Right.
personnel.
Same with the county.
Yeah, exactly, you know,
Right.
but, you know, it's way different than trying to put on an event that's got, you know, everything from, you know, locking on a band to traffic control and everything in the middle.
Right, and as far as some of these issues that might need a budget, we did talk about that a lot last year, but it was keeping an eye on a 5-year plan so that we would not have to raise taxes every year a little bit. So unfortunately, things keep going up in price, but we're gonna have to keep an eye on.
So we probably
what
want
goes
to
up.
take a look at what, yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully, hopefully we can make some money, especially with some of these things like the concert and
And the food
fund,
trucks.
and food trucks, and be able to fund other things.
So the other items I had as longer-term goals, because they're, you know, they're just going to be things that are ongoing, but just continuing to look for grant opportunities, like that huge grant that Alice was able to get written up for Phase 4 of the beach, just continuing to do that. And then also updating our overall beach plan. And I do believe that that may come to us from BISAC, but we don't have, the plan that we are working towards right now, like with the grant for Phase 4, is very different than what you will see in our previous beach plan. So I think that our strategies have evolved over time, and that needs to get updated so that we all are on the same page as how we're
Yeah,
going
because
to be
I actually
handling
have
it.
on here is enlisting and getting a beach engineer. I've got that as a goal for next year.
And I've got with the beaches, and we hadn't discussed it, but it's been at the Shoreline Protection Commission meetings, is the removal of Vitex from the dunes. It's an invasive, I mean, we can't get the dunes to be stabilized with vegetation as long as we have Vitex. It's a weed that's just essentially kills any vegetation that's attempting to grow on the dunes. And I think we need, and we talked about it's actually an island-wide project. It doesn't really help if one town does it and the other two towns don't participate, because it just, the wind blows the seeds and whatever from one beach to the next. So it's an education process. We have to educate the property owners about how to get it removed. We may have to make a commitment to how, if we're going to fund, how much we're going to fund to do it. But I think it definitely needs to be a goal, and I can get with Alice and Scott. Scott at Public Works seemed very familiar with how to remove it. But I think it's something we need to definitely attack before we put some more sea oats out there, because it'll just be killed.
This was a huge issue back in the early 2000s. We had a lot of informational meetings about it. We had different resources come out, talk to our property owners, talk to our people. One of the problems is some of the places, and not to pick on anybody in particular, but like the St. Regis, that's basically what their dunes are. And it's trying to get people to change their mindset. We've got to work hard, just to let you know that there are barriers up there to people not wanting to change. And I agree with you. It's a very invasive plant that will choke out the native plants that hold our dunes together well, but this will be a challenge. I just wanted to let you
Right. And,
know.
That'd be a goal that he suggests.
Yes, it's a good goal.
and like Fred said, it needs to be an island-wide effort with the three towns. Town managers are going to meet, if we get finished in time here, at 11 o'clock to talk about it from a town-wide perspective, but it does need to be an island-wide initiative.
So what I have here, we've talked about this, is for some of these specific committees to come back to the board with what their goals will be for next year. And I've got that for the Capital Improvements Committee. I've got that for Parks and Rec. I've got it for BISAC. I've got that for Legislative and Cobra. I don't think that one's going to be that difficult to do. The other goals that I've heard so far would be just monitoring the budget and keeping an eye on the future, so we're not surprised or at budget time, and we're able to share the information that we're seeing come in with all the residents. Continuing to look for grant opportunities, a beach engineer, and a beach plan, and Vitex from Dunes. What have I missed?
I think you're gonna be asking people just to, as they think about stuff, to send them into you, correct?
Well, I'd like them to come to the board, like if you've drafted.
I'm in
yeah.
for the January meeting, to
Yep.
have more, people have more thoughts and more specificity,
Yeah.
like you were talking about with Parks and Rec.
Yeah,
Right,
please.
to be able to come back in.
I think another goal should be to follow through on what got started with the Resilient Coastal Community Program and the engineering grant we got to designate the areas in town where stormwater is an issue. Alice presented that results of that engineer's work to us in our board packet, so we need to follow up on, ways to get grants to at least pick, I think the board needs to pick one or two projects that were outlined in that report and move ahead with them.
Well, and that schedule has been evolving very rapidly, and I know that Surf City's been giving updates monthly at the Shoreline Protection Commission meeting. I did provide the board a list of those projects, and looking at those because there's, a lot of them are DOT roads. One of them is actually a paper street where we would have to approve a resolution to take that street over. The quickest one that we would be able to move forward with, depending on the timeline, which seems to keep changing with the engineer, for the project is the project that was proposed for Richard Peters Park, to take care of flooding, stormwater flooding in that area, and to build bioswales and to mitigate that further. That might be the initial one that we're able to do quickest. We still do not know how many we're going to be able to submit, if we're going to be able to submit one per town, or if it's going to be one joint project. We're still trying to work through that and get confirmation on what the process is. There's been a lot of uncertainty throughout the process, and I'm sure, as you know, Mayor Pro Tem's been involved since the beginning, and there was a lot of back and forth from day one.
Can I just make two quick points? One is, when we're talking about the beach engineer thing you brought up, I mean, part of what I think that one of our goals has to be this year is not just chasing grants, but understanding how much money we have. And the example I've used is, we just put all this sand down in Phase 5, and now we've got another grant that we can get down there, where we've got to put up $5 million as a match, versus spending that $5 million in some place that doesn't have sand. That's the kind of stuff that we need.
Well, that's why we need a plan. We have no plan.
And the other thing too, and apologies for leaving it out, we also need to get her goals. Right? Because, if her goals are, we've got to have A, B, C, and D. Right, no, but what resources does she need? Because we go back to her with a goal, and she says, that's great, but now I need A, B, and C. All right? Then we have to take another look at that. So I think we need to look to you as well.
Well,
Yeah, should we ask Alice what her goals are and then feed off of that, instead of us telling her, let's let her tell us, and
Well,
then.
it's really,
both, isn't it?
it's both, and
Yeah.
it really helps to get your goals as a board first, for me to be able to sit back and formulate everything, come back
and
to
I
the
don't think
board.
we've said anything that,
No, and if there was anything that I thought we were, just like, the Vitex, we're all kind of already, we're working on that already. There's some things we're already working on. It's already on the radar.
so are we, we could
that I'll come
approach
back
it,
with.
possibly approach it this way, if we could get just this drafted up and just have it, I don't know if I could still add it to the board packet for January, or is it too late? We can do it then, even at the meeting, right?
Okay, yep.
But just, so if it's in there, we have a chance, we're transparent with what we're thinking our goals are, everybody can digest it, and then we could talk about it briefly at the January meeting to see if we need to change anything or clarify anything, or if Alice has a chance then also to digest it and see if there's anything that you think you would like to add, or if there's any impact, as Rick had mentioned, to any of these goals to what we've currently got staff for.
Well, but the other thing you talked about too was short-term versus long-term, because Connie had talked about having a planning session to take it all in. I mean, we could have a meeting in January to say, this is what we want to accomplish over the next 3 or 4 months, but then go to the longer term, to Connie's point.
It's kind of where I was going with my raised hand was,
I didn't see
what
it,
is
sorry.
the plan for, are we planning to have a board retreat? And if so, when, and how does all this mesh into that? And if we're going to go down the path of doing all this at a couple of regularly scheduled board meetings, do we still need to have a board retreat, and if so, when?
Well, we did not do a retreat last year, we just did the budget meetings. So, I mean, my only concern is I would hate to wait until we get into budget time to start at least being on the same page with what our goals are, because staff is working so hard to pull the budget together at that point that I don't want to throw more.
So my thought is that if we're going to have a board retreat, we ought to probably not wait until budget time. We should probably have it
Right.
earlier rather
It
than
needs
later,
to
like
happen
February,
beginning of next
January,
year.
February,
Yeah,
yeah.
because you're also assuming that we come out of there with full agreement on everything, and then and we could step back from it and say, we had a long discussion, but we haven't seen
Yeah,
what the
but-
economics look, or whatever, so.
Again, that's, our output is then the input for
Nope, good point.
for her.
So then why don't we do this? Why don't we, again, just have it on the agenda for the January meeting, not to go into significant discussion on, but just to make sure that we have some type of alignment or discuss any concerns regarding the goals. And then if we could schedule a work session or a retreat in January, like mid to late January, or then we could actually
Early
go
February worked better
through.
for me, I'm gone the end
Oh,
of January.
yeah, then let's do February's fine.
Okay.
Then we could go through the specifics of what each, you know,
agree.
each board, what we're presenting back for, because then we have more time.
Nope, I
So
agree.
like you can come back, you can work through all the BISAC stuff, you can come back, we can all digest it as a board, discuss it, and
I
move
like
forward
that, I
from there.
like that, that makes sense.
And we may, if we need to have some town staff at the parts of the retreat, just to,
They're there.
They'll be
okay,
there.
okay.
All right. And so the other item, any additional discussion?
Did you want to talk about the concert? It's on here.
Well, what we did kind of wrap it into these other conversations. So we have a list of names now for folks that can help us put this together. So
Fine.
what I'd like to do
Wasn't my
is
issue.
just get with Connie and see if we can come up with some type of a work plan that we can bring back to the board.
Yeah.
Did you need anything on the concert? I thought signing
Is
contract.
there feedback on the poster?
I like that. I thought it looked good.
Okay.
I did too.
Okay.
Very, very good.
I meant to email you, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you.
And
Then your additional item.
we talked about goals.
No, the one you said, the final approval.
Yes, that's what I was looking for. So the final version of the Fish and Wildlife, has everybody had a chance to review that? And is there any additional concerns?
I like Connie's comments.
Yeah, I do too.
Do we have the final,
a journalism major or something.
yes, Connie did very well. Do we have the final numbers? There were some missing numbers.
She's working on that now.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
They're not, some of them aren't right, but we have some numbers now, so we can fill in the numbers.
The county provided numbers last night, which we have to look at further.
Okay, but, you know, I would hope that getting the numbers precise wouldn't hold up the letter going out.
No.
No, it's not. We're gonna submit it this afternoon. That's the purpose of talking about right now. If everybody is good with the final version of the letter by consensus, then we'll have
Good with
it
that.
submitted.
Okay.
And no one gave me any feedback prior to our meeting this morning, so I'm assuming everybody is now happy with the way it turned out.
Okay, then we have a motion to adjourn.
So
What, do we didn't have a
Yes.
motion? Okay.